My older sister looked at me and pointed to the trash can. Your spot is over there. At her ceremony, my parents scoffed. That's where the stray bulldog likes best. I remained silent, stood up, and walked out without saying a word. But just 30 minutes later, my sister screamed, her voice trembling. It was her engagement party in the backyard of our family home in Bellevue, just outside Seattle. 120 guests filled the space under string lights, glasses clinking and music playing. A light drizzle fell from the Seattle sky, but the mood stayed festive for everyone else. Then she did it right in front of the entire crowd. She pointed straight to the trash can and announced it loud enough for everyone to hear. My parents laughed louder than anyone else, their voices cutting through the music. The whole party went quiet. Every head turned my way. The humiliation burned through me like fire. But I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the reaction they wanted. I simply stood up from my chair, turned around, and walked out without saying a word. The rain hit my face as I headed straight to my car. But just 30 minutes later, my sister screamed, her voice trembling. If you've ever been treated like the black sheep in your own family, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And tell me in the comments, what's the worst thing your family has ever done to you? I read every single comment. My older sister Jocelyn had always been the favorite one in our family. From the time we were kids growing up in Bellevue, everything revolved around her. Mom and Dad made sure of that. Nancy and Douglas Ellis never tried to hide it. They called it supporting the one with potential. It started early and never stopped. Every decision in our house seemed to put Jocelyn first, and I was left to pick up the scraps. When it came to college funds, there was only one account. It was set up for Jocelyn the day she turned 14. I saw the paperwork once when I was 16. The folder said, Jocelyn's college fund, in big letters. There was nothing for me. I asked Mom about it one evening in the kitchen while she was washing dishes. She wiped her hands on a towel and said I could figure it out on my own like everyone else. So I worked 2 part-time jobs through high school. I waited tables at a local diner after school and stocked shelves at the grocery store on weekends. I saved every dollar for tuition while Jocelyn got her books and dorm paid in full. She never had to worry about loans or late-night studying after a shift. I remember watching her pack for college while I calculated how many hours I needed to work to cover my first semester. Grades never mattered the same way either. I brought home straight A's in junior year. Jocelyn had mostly B's. Dad took her out to dinner to celebrate her hard work. When I showed my report card at the dinner table the same week, he just nodded and said good job. Then he asked if Jocelyn needed help with her homework. It was like my efforts were expected while hers were a big deal. I stayed up late studying for tests while she went out with friends. The difference in how they reacted made me question if I was doing something wrong. It was the same with looks. Jocelyn was the pretty one. Mom would take her shopping for new clothes every season. I got the hand-me-downs from her closet. At family photos during holidays, they always put her in front. I stood in the back row, one Christmas. Mom told me I should smile more like my sister. It stuck with me for years. I started to believe I was the plain one who didn't deserve the same attention. Graduation was the worst. Jocelyn's high school ceremony turned into a huge party. Relatives flew in from across the country. Dad rented a hall and hired a caterer. They gave her a new laptop as a gift and made toasts to her bright future. The whole family posed for pictures with her in the center. When my turn came 2 years later, it was just a small dinner at home. No guests, no gifts. Mom said we had already done enough for the first one. I sat there eating my meal in silence while they talked about how proud they were of Jocelyn's achievements. The car situation was classic. On Jocelyn's 16th birthday, Dad surprised her with a brand new sedan. Red, shiny, full options. She drove it to school every day and posted pictures online. I got the old minivan 2 years later when she didn't want it anymore. The engine rattled. The AC barely worked. But it was mine. Or so they said. I spent my own money fixing it up just to keep it running. Every time I turned the key, it reminded me of the difference in how we were treated. There were other moments too. Birthdays always favored her. Jocelyn got big parties with friends and presents piled high. Mine were quiet family dinners with a card and maybe a small gift. Summer vacations were planned around her activities. When she wanted to go to camp, we all went. When I asked for a trip to visit colleges, Dad said money was tight that year. I ended up staying home and working extra shifts instead. Even small things added up. Jocelyn got the latest phone for her birthday one year. I kept using my cracked screen model until it died. Mom would brag about Jocelyn's accomplishments on social media but never mentioned mine. It felt like I was invisible in my own home. During family dinners, the conversation always turned to Jocelyn's day. Dad would ask her about school or friends and listen for hours. When I tried to share something from my day, they would nod quickly and change the subject back to her. It happened so often that I stopped trying. One time when I was sick with the flu in high school, Mom stayed home to take care of Jocelyn because she had a dance recital. I stayed in bed alone with medicine and soup from the microwave. Jocelyn's events always came first, even when I needed help. These patterns repeated year after year. I learned to expect nothing and to work for everything. I kept driving through the rain, the wipers moving back and forth. All those memories piled up until I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled into a parking lot near downtown Seattle and grabbed my phone. Marcus Reed was the only person I could think of. He had been my friend since middle school and now worked as a forensic accountant. I dialed his number and waited for him to pick up. When he answered, I told him I needed to talk right away. Marcus agreed to meet me right away. He was already at the corner table when I walked into the coffee shop downtown. Marcus Reed had been my friend since middle school, back when we both hated gym class and shared notes in history. These days he worked as a forensic accountant, the kind of job that meant he spent his time pulling apart financial records for lawyers and banks. He stood up and gave me a quick nod. I sat down and told him I needed his help with something serious. He didn't ask questions at first. He just opened his laptop and waited for me to explain what was going on. I kept the story short. I mentioned the party and how everything had come to a head, but I didn't go into the old memories. Marcus listened, then typed something into his computer. He turned the screen toward me. Kendra, I think I already know part of this, he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were serious. He had been working on a separate case for a client who did business with Ryan Thompson. During his review, he had come across documents tied to the Ellis family trust. What he found wasn't just sloppy paperwork, it was deliberate. Jocelyn had used the trust to secure a loan, $7 million. The money was supposed to go toward Ryan's new tech startup. She had presented the application to the bank with all the right signatures. The problem was one of those signatures wasn't real. It was mine. Marcus clicked through the files slowly so I could see everything. There was the original trust agreement from years ago. Then the loan papers dated 3 years back. Jocelyn had come to me one afternoon at the house. She had a few pages and said it was just routine paperwork to update our family records for taxes. She smiled the whole time and told me not to worry. I signed where she pointed without reading every line. I trusted her. Now I saw what she had really done. Marcus zoomed in on the signatures. His software had run a comparison against documents I had signed later for my own accounts. The pressure on the pen was different. The slant of certain letters didn't match. Even the way the ink sat on the paper showed signs of tracing. The bank had approved the loan in stages over 6 months. The transfers went straight into an account connected to Ryan's company. Monthly statements showed the money being used for office space and equipment. But the business never took off the way they promised. Payments on the loan had already fallen behind. The trust itself was now at risk of being frozen. I sat there staring at the numbers. $7 million. That was the kind of money people worked their whole lives to save. Jocelyn had taken it by forging my name and lying to everyone. Marcus kept talking. He explained that if the bank started a full audit, the forgery would come out quickly. He had already printed the key pages and saved them onto a small USB drive. He slid it across the table. "This is everything you need," he said. "The signatures, the transfers, the dates. It's all here." My mind raced through that afternoon 3 years ago. Jocelyn had been so casual about it. She had even joked that I was helping the family. I never imagined she was setting me up. Now the proof was right in front of me. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. Marcus watched me closely. He didn't push me one way or the other. He just said the choice was mine. I could walk away, or I could use what he had given me. Either way, he would back me up if I needed more help later. I picked up the USB and put it in my jacket pocket. It felt small, but heavy. The decision came fast. I wasn't going to wait another day. The party was still happening back in Bellevue. The guests were probably still laughing and toasting. They had no idea what was about to change. I thanked Marcus and stood up. He wished me luck and said to call if anything went wrong. I left the coffee shop without finishing my drink. The streets outside were quiet now that the rain had stopped. I got back into my car and started the engine. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The rain had stopped by the time I left the coffee shop. I sat in my car with the USB drive in my hand. The small black stick felt heavier than it should. $7 million. Forged signatures. A family trust turned into a weapon. I turned the drive over between my fingers while the streetlights flickered on downtown. Marcus had given me the truth in a way no one else ever had. Now I had to decide what to do with it. I started the engine and headed back toward Bellevue. The highway was quiet this time of night. My mind kept replaying the moment Jocelyn had asked me to sign those papers 3 years ago. She had been so relaxed, laughing about how paperwork was such a pain. I had trusted her completely. That trust was gone now. In its place was something cold and clear. I wasn't going to let this slide. Back at the house, the party would still be going strong. Jocelyn would be smiling for photos with Ryan Thompson. Mom and Dad would be telling everyone how proud they were of their successful daughter. The thought made my stomach tighten. They had spent years making sure Jocelyn got everything while I got leftovers. Tonight, that pattern ended. I pulled over at a gas station to copy the files one more time onto my phone as backup. The attendant didn't even look up as I worked. I labeled the new copy carefully and slipped it into my glove compartment. The original USB stayed in my jacket. I needed to get it into the right hands without anyone noticing. Ryan Thompson had always seemed decent. He worked hard on his startup and treated Jocelyn well in public. But I wondered how much he knew about the money. Had he pushed her to use the trust, or was he just as blind as I had been? Either way, the truth would hit him tonight too. I didn't feel sorry for him. He was about to marry into a family built on lies. The drive back took 20 minutes. I kept the radio off and focused on the road. Every mile brought me closer to the moment I had waited for without realizing it. I wasn't angry in the loud way people shout. This was quieter. It was the kind of anger that comes after years of being pushed aside. I parked a block away from the house so no one would see my car return too soon. The backyard lights were still bright. Laughter carried over the fence. I took a deep breath and walked toward the side gate. No one stopped me. The guests were too busy enjoying the evening to notice one more person slipping in. I moved through the crowd with the USB hidden in my palm. The gift table sat near the main tent. Dozens of wrapped boxes and envelopes waited for Jocelyn and Ryan to open later. I picked up a plain white envelope from the table and slid the USB inside. On the front, I wrote a short note in block letters. For the happy couple, Open this one first. I placed the envelope at the front of the pile where it would be easy to find. No one paid attention to me. I stepped back into the shadows and waited. The music played on. Glasses clinked. Jocelyn's laugh rang out from across the yard. She had no idea her perfect night was about to crack wide open. I stayed long enough to make sure the envelope stayed visible. Then I turned and left the same way I had come in. The rain started again as I reached my car. This time, I didn't mind the drops on the windshield. They matched the steady beat in my chest. The next 30 minutes would change everything. I slipped back into the backyard just as the music changed to a slower song. The guests were still milling around the gift table when Jocelyn announced it was time to open a few presents. She stood in the center with Ryan beside her, both of them smiling for the cameras. Mom and Dad hovered close, looking proud as ever. I stayed near the edge of the crowd where the lights didn't reach me fully. No one seemed to notice I had returned. Jocelyn picked up the plain white envelope first. She read the note out loud in her bright voice. For the happy couple, open this one first. A few people chuckled at the simple message. She tore the flap open and pulled out the USB drive. Ryan took it from her hand and turned it over. Looks like someone wants us to see a video, he said. Jocelyn laughed and asked one of the catering staff to bring the projector they had set up earlier for the slideshow. The staff plugged the drive in quickly. The big screen lit up behind the main table. Everyone quieted down, expecting sweet messages or old photos. Instead, the first file opened to a clear scan of the family trust document. Then the loan application appeared. The signatures were highlighted in red by Marcus's software. My name sat there in bold letters next to Jocelyn's handwriting. A murmur spread through the crowd. Jocelyn's smile froze. She stepped closer to the screen, as if that would change what she was seeing. Ryan's face went pale. He stared at the transfers listed below the signatures. $7 million moved in neat rows from the trust account straight into his company files. The dates matched perfectly with the months they had been planning their wedding. Mom tried to laugh it off at first. There must be some mistake, she said, but her voice sounded thin. Dad moved forward and asked the staff to turn the projector off. The staff didn't move fast enough. The next file showed the forensic comparison. Side-by-side images proved the forgery. The pressure patterns didn't match. The ink analysis was clear. Gasps rose from the guests. Phones started coming out as people recorded what was happening. Jocelyn's hands shook as she grabbed the USB and tried to yank it from the laptop. The screen stayed on. Ryan turned to her slowly. His voice was low, but everyone heard it. Did you use Kendra's name without telling her? Jocelyn opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then she looked around desperately. It was just paperwork, she said. I was helping us get started. Her explanation sounded weak even to her own ears. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few relatives whispered to each other. Mom kept repeating that it was a family matter and they should talk later. Dad tried to smile at the guests and suggest everyone go back to enjoying the food. No one moved. The projector kept running through the bank statements. Late payments. Missed deadlines. The trust balance dropping lower every month. I watched from the shadows as Jocelyn's perfect night unraveled in real time. She kept glancing toward the gate as if she hoped I would appear and fix this for her. I stayed exactly where I was. Ryan stepped away from her. His shoulders were rigid. He looked at the screen one more time, then at Jocelyn. The disappointment on his face was unmistakable. The music had stopped completely now. Only the sound of rain on the tent roof remained. Jocelyn stood frozen in the middle of the circle of guests. Her hands still clutched the empty envelope. Everything she had built was cracking open right in front of the people who mattered most to her. Exactly 30 minutes had passed since I placed that envelope on the table. The screen stayed lit even after Jocelyn tried to unplug it. Chaos broke out in the backyard within seconds. Jocelyn's scream cut through the rain and the silence that had fallen over the guests. Her voice cracked as she shouted for someone to turn everything off. Ryan Thompson stepped back from her like she had burned him. His face showed pure shock mixed with anger. He looked at the bank statements still displayed on the projector and then back at Jocelyn. "You forged her signature for $7 million, he asked. His tone was low, but carried across the entire yard. Jocelyn kept shaking her head and repeating that it wasn't what it looked like. She reached for his arm, but he pulled away. Guests started whispering louder. Some pulled out phones to record, while others looked uncomfortable and began moving toward the exit. Mom pushed through the crowd, trying to calm things down. She told everyone it was a misunderstanding and that family business should stay private. Her hands trembled as she spoke. Dad stood frozen for a moment before he finally walked over to the projector and yanked the cord himself. The screen went black, but the damage was already done. Ryan ran a hand through his hair and let out a bitter laugh. "I thought we were building something together. You told me the money came from investors." Jocelyn tried to explain again, but her words tumbled out too fast. She said the startup needed the funds to get off the ground and that she had planned to pay it back before anyone noticed. Ryan didn't let her finish. He told her the wedding was off and that he didn't want to see her again. He grabbed his jacket from a nearby chair and walked straight out through the side gate without looking back. The guests didn't know what to do. A few close friends of Jocelyn tried to comfort her, but she pushed them away. She kept scanning the crowd as if searching for me. When she couldn't find me, she started crying loudly. Mom wrapped an arm around her shoulders and whispered something in her ear. Dad stood off to the side, talking urgently on his phone. I could hear him mentioning lawyers and damage control. More people started leaving. The music never came back on. The catering staff quietly began packing up the food tables. Jocelyn's perfect engagement party had turned into a public disaster in front of 120 witnesses. The rain picked up again, making the tent feel smaller and colder. I stayed hidden near the fence long enough to see Jocelyn collapse into a chair. Her makeup ran down her face. Mom kept patting her back while Dad argued with someone on the phone about the trust account. The USB drive lay on the ground where Jocelyn had dropped it. No one picked it up. This was the moment everything changed for them. The golden child who had always gotten everything now faced the consequences in the most public way possible. I felt no satisfaction in the usual sense, just a quiet sense of finality. The family that had pushed me aside for years was finally seeing the cracks I had lived with my whole life. I turned and left the backyard for the second time that night. This time I didn't look back. The drive home through the Seattle rain felt different. The weight I had carried for so long was starting to lift, even if the road ahead was still unclear. Jocelyn kept calling my phone for the next hour. I let every call go to voicemail. Mom sent messages begging me to come back and talk. Dad left a voice note saying we needed to handle this as a family. I read none of them. Instead, I drove straight to my apartment and locked the door. The silence inside felt like the first real peace I had known in years. By morning, the news had already spread through our social circles in Bellevue. Friends texted asking if the rumors were true. I didn't reply to any of them either. Ryan Thompson filed to cancel all the wedding vendors that same week. Jocelyn posted a vague story about personal issues but deleted it hours later. The bank that had issued the loan started sending formal notices about the overdue payments and the suspected fraud. I spent the next few days deleting old family photos from my phone. Every picture of Jocelyn smiling at holidays or graduations now carried a different meaning. I blocked her number along with Mom and Dad. The cut felt clean and necessary. They had chosen their golden child for decades. Now they could deal with the fallout without me. The trust account was frozen by the end of the month. Lawyers got involved on both sides. Jocelyn faced questions from the bank investigators. Ryan made it clear he wanted nothing more to do with the Ellis family. The community that had always praised my sister started whispering about the scandal instead. I didn't attend any family meetings. I didn't offer explanations. I simply moved forward with my own life while theirs continued to unravel. Weeks turned into months, and the consequences kept unfolding. The bank launched a full investigation into the forged loan documents. Investigators contacted every signer listed on the trust papers. When they reached me, I told them the truth. I had signed papers 3 years earlier without reading every page because Jocelyn had presented them as routine updates. I provided the forensic comparison Marcus had given me. The bank froze the remaining trust assets immediately and referred the case to civil authorities. Jocelyn received official notices at the family home in Bellevue. She had to hire her own lawyer to respond to the fraud allegations. Ryan Thompson filed a civil suit against her for misrepresentation and emotional distress. He claimed the forged documents had damaged his business reputation and wasted months of his time. Court dates were set for the following spring. Jocelyn tried to negotiate with the bank, but they refused any settlement that didn't include full repayment plus penalties. Mom and Dad spent thousands on legal fees trying to protect the family name. They attended meetings with the trust attorneys and begged for leniency. The community in Bellevue turned cold toward them. Invitations to neighborhood events dried up. Old friends stopped returning calls. Dad's golf group quietly removed him from their regular foursome. Mom's book club made excuses whenever she suggested hosting. I never went back to the house. I blocked every number and deleted every group chat. When Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced one afternoon, I didn't open the door. She left a note taped to the mailbox asking me to think about family. I threw it away without reading the rest. Dad sent a certified letter through his lawyer requesting a family mediation session. I declined in writing and stated clearly that I wanted no further contact. The trust was eventually dissolved to cover the outstanding loan balance. Jocelyn lost her share of the inheritance that had been earmarked for her. The house in Bellevue went on the market 6 months later because legal bills kept mounting. Mom and Dad moved to a smaller condo on the other side of Seattle. They told relatives they were downsizing for retirement, but everyone knew the real reason. Jocelyn's engagement ring was returned in a plain envelope. She stopped posting on social media entirely. The last time I heard about her, she was working a retail job in a mall across town while fighting the remaining lawsuits. Ryan moved his startup operations to Portland and cut all ties with anyone connected to the Ellis family. I changed my phone number and email address to make the separation complete. No holidays, no birthdays, no emergency calls. The silence felt permanent, and I embraced it. Every time the phone rang with an unknown number, I let it go to voicemail. I never listened to the messages. My life continued without their voices in it. I focused on my job and saved money for the first time without worrying about family obligations. The weight that had pressed on me for 28 years lifted slowly. I slept better. I laughed more freely with new friends. I made decisions based on what I wanted, instead of what would keep the peace at home. The cut was total. There would be no dramatic reunion or tearful apologies. They had chosen their path for decades, and I had finally chosen mine. The family I grew up with no longer existed in my world, and I felt no regret about it. 1 year later, I sat in my small apartment overlooking Lake Washington. The view from my window showed gray skies and steady rain. The same Seattle weather I had grown up with. This time, it felt different. I no longer waited for calls that would never come or wondered what the family was saying about me. The quiet in my life belonged to me alone. I had taken a promotion at work 6 months earlier. The extra responsibility kept me busy, and the raise let me furnish the apartment the way I wanted. No hand-me-down furniture. No guilt about spending money on myself. I bought a comfortable couch and a reading chair that faced the water. Evenings now ended with a book or a simple meal I cooked without rushing to answer messages. New friends filled the spaces that family used to occupy. We met for coffee downtown or walked the trails near the lake on weekends. They knew little about my past and asked even less. I shared what I chose to share and kept the rest private. Their support felt genuine because it came without conditions or comparisons. I still drove past Bellevue sometimes on my way to meetings. The old house had sold to a young couple with 2 kids. The for sale sign was long gone. I felt nothing when I saw the new curtains in the windows. That chapter had closed completely. Jocelyn moved to a studio apartment closer to her job. The lawsuits dragged on for months before she settled with the bank by agreeing to a repayment plan that would take years. Ryan's civil case ended with a judgment against her. She paid what she could, and the rest stayed as a debt hanging over her future. Mom and Dad rarely mentioned her name when they spoke to distant relatives. Their own finances had taken a hit from the legal costs and the lost inheritance. I never reached out. They never tried again after the first few months. The silence between us grew solid and unbreakable. No holiday cards arrived. No surprise visits. The family I once knew existed only in old photos I had stored away in a box in my closet. Looking back, I understood the pattern clearly. They had chosen one child to lift up and another to push aside. That choice created the distance I finally accepted. Blood ties did not guarantee respect or fairness. Sometimes the healthiest decision was to step away and build something better on your own. I learned that protecting my peace mattered more than keeping connections that only brought pain. I deserved to be seen and valued for who I was, not measured against someone else. Walking away did not make me cruel. It made me free. The rain continued outside my window, but I no longer felt cold inside. I had made a life where I set the rules and chose the people around me. The stray bulldog they once mocked had finally found her own yard. And for the first time I could say with complete honesty that I was exactly where I belonged.